A tax rate of just 1.2% might seem hardly worth debating. The figure is so small that many people even consider it nothing more than a rounding error in the vast commercial ledger of the United States. Yet ironically, it was precisely this tiny number that sparked tremors across the global gold market. That morning, on the trading floors of New York, gold prices suddenly shot upward like a chain reaction. Electronic screens flickered nonstop, traders furrowed their brows, and hedge fund managers urgently dialed in their orders. All of it was triggered by one unexpected decision. The US had officially imposed tariffs on small Swiss gold bars, those weighing 100 ounces to 1 kilogram, which had previously been considered immune. But the real significance wasn't just in that 1.2%. It was like a pebble tossed into a still lake. The ripples spread outward, touching every layer of the financial surface, from ETFs and central banks to luxury jewelry workshops. A small wave had set off a major tremor. People suddenly realized that in the hyper-connected world of global finance, politics doesn't always need heavy-handed measures to cause disruption. Sometimes a single line of new regulation, a modest tax rate, is enough to shift market behavior. And behind what seemed like a trivial decision, a bigger question began to surface. Why was the US targeting Swiss gold? Switzerland is hardly a mining giant, nor is it a direct economic rival. Yet this small nation in the heart of Europe holds the most delicate key to the gold market: refining and trust. Roughly 70% of the world's gold is refined, stamped, and circulated through Switzerland's system. A slight touch on this link, and it's not hard to imagine how massive the chain reaction could become. So then, was this merely an effort to fight smuggling and promote transparency of origin? Or was it, in fact, a strategic test by the Trump administration? Could Washington have been trying to gauge how a small tariff might ripple across the global market without paying the price of a full-blown crisis? To truly understand, we need to dig deeper. The real reasons behind America's decision and why Switzerland, a country long seen as neutral, the vault of gold for the world, was chosen. This is where the next chapter begins. Why did the US tax Swiss gold? At first glance, the US tariff on Swiss gold might seem like nothing more than a technical adjustment, a minor tweak in America's already complex tariff schedule. But in politics and economics, nothing happens by accident. The Trump administration had long viewed tariffs not just as tools for raising revenue, but as political levers, instruments to unlock bargaining power in trade and diplomacy. And this time, the target wasn't China or the European Union, the usual rivals, but Switzerland, a nation known for neutrality and long considered one of Washington's most reliable partners. So what lay behind this decision? First, it was a message to the world about transparency in gold sourcing. Amid growing concerns that gold from African conflict zones or murky supply chains was slipping into Western financial systems, the US wanted to apply pressure. Every bar of gold entering America should carry a clear fingerprint of its origin. A 1.2% tariff may sound light, but it was enough to force importers to make a choice: buy certified transparent gold or accept the risk and cost of paying extra. But that was only the surface. Look deeper, and you see Washington experimenting with a subtler approach, using a small tariff to test whether the market would change its behavior. Switzerland is the world's largest hub for refining and distributing gold. Nearly every legitimate flow of gold passes through refineries in Ticino or Valais. By targeting Switzerland, the US was striking at the valve of the global gold system. The real question wasn't how much revenue a 1.2% tariff could raise, but rather, how will the market react? How will capital flows adjust? And could a small policy be transformed into a strategic tool? There were also broader political calculations. Switzerland is famous not only for gold, but also for pharmaceuticals, luxury watches, precision microchips, and advanced biotech. By putting gold on the table, Washington had created another bargaining chip. When Bern seeks to protect its multi-billion-dollar exports of watches or pharmaceuticals, Washington can say, concede here, and we'll ease off there. In this way, gold became a card in a larger negotiation game. Domestic politics also played a role. Trump had tied his image closely to the promise of "Make America Great Again," which included boosting domestic mining and manufacturing. A tariff on refined Swiss gold, even if symbolic, was enough to score points with voters in states where precious metal extraction matters. The underlying message was clear. America won't rely solely on foreign gold. We can and should prioritize our own supply. Yet what made the tariff truly interesting was its small size. It was like a quiet experiment by Washington. Could a light touch create big ripples in the global market? If the answer was yes, it opened the door to a new U.S. trade strategy. No need for risky 25% or 50% sledgehammer tariffs when small, well-placed levers might do the job. And when asking why Switzerland, the answer becomes even clearer. Switzerland may not mine much gold, but it controls the most critical stage, refining and certification. It is Switzerland that turns raw gold into internationally accepted bars, the kind central banks store, ETFs hold, and jewelers turn into rings and watches. In other words, Switzerland doesn't mine gold. It mines trust. And once Washington touched that link, the entire system shuddered. Here lies the heart of the story. This wasn't merely a trade tariff. It was a stress test aimed at the very core of the world's gold trust system. If Switzerland adjusted, Washington would gain justification to expand this approach into other sectors. And if Switzerland pushed back hard, that reaction itself would give the US fresh leverage in broader negotiations. From this, we see that to fully grasp the meaning of the tariff, one must understand Switzerland's unique place in the gold world. Why does a small nation with no major mines control 70% of the world's refining? Why is Swiss gold considered the gold standard of gold itself? And why is it that a mere touch on Switzerland can send tremors through global finance? That is the journey ahead, to explore Switzerland's role at the very center of the global gold system, and to see how a small country can stand at the heart of great financial waves. Switzerland, a small country in the heart of Europe, has long been the world's largest hub for gold refining, without owning a single gold mine. The strange and fascinating truth is this: they don't extract gold, yet they control the heartbeat of the entire global gold market. Nearly 70% of the gold mined in Africa, South America, and Asia passes through refineries in Ticino, Valais, or Neuchâtel before entering international circulation. It is here that raw gold, often mixed with impurities, tangled in complex origins, and carrying hidden risks, is transformed into London good delivery bars, stamped with the fingerprints of trust, credibility, and global value. Gold is not just a precious metal, it is an asset that demands absolute trust. A central bank in Tokyo won't easily accept a gold bar straight from a remote mine in Africa without an international certificate. But if that same bar has been refined in Switzerland, stamped by a renowned refinery, quality checked, and insured under European standards, it instantly becomes an asset accepted everywhere, from Wall Street ETFs to national reserve vaults. This transformation is Switzerland's invisible contribution, turning anonymous gold into gold with a name. Behind these refineries lies an invisible pipeline, operating so smoothly that few even notice. From dusty mines in Peru or Ghana, shipments of raw gold travel by sea and air to Zurich or Geneva, then move directly into refining lines. Within days, they are reborn as gleaming bars, sealed, certified, and engraved with serial numbers, ready for banks, investment funds, or even jewelers. In this way, Switzerland functions as the central hub, the heart, pumping lifeblood into the entire gold ecosystem. What makes this system unique is not just its scale, but its absolute reliability. Swiss gold is like a global passport. It carries the assurance that origins have been verified, refining is transparent, and every step of transport is covered by international insurance. That trust didn't appear overnight. It was built over centuries through strict laws, political neutrality, and enduring financial governance. In a world full of turmoil, Swiss gold is one of the few things that Washington, Beijing, Dubai, and London can all agree on. It is worth its weight. That is why even a small intervention, a new tax, or stricter inspection procedures can immediately raise the premium, the gap between certified and uncertified gold. What financial markets always try to eliminate, friction, suddenly appears. And that friction doesn't just slow down a few shipments, it throws off the rhythm of the entire system. A bank may face higher repo costs, a hedge fund may have to adjust its spreads, and an individual investor might pay more for a gold bracelet. All these ripples begin the moment Switzerland is touched. In other words, Switzerland is like the central gear in a vast machine. Small though it may be, if it is tightened or slowed, the whole machine trembles. And this is precisely why a seemingly insignificant US tariff caused a global chain reaction. It wasn't merely a matter between Washington and Bern, it reverberated across the entire gold network, where every second is calibrated for speed and trust. To truly grasp how sensitive this system is, we return to the impact of that 1.2% tariff. A small number, yes, but applied to flows worth billions of dollars, it becomes a kind of tax on time, forcing the entire system to endure more friction. And in finance, time is money. A single day's delay in certification can shift bond yields, strengthen the US dollar, and force investors to reallocate portfolios. That is when a small tariff turns into a major shock. And to understand why those waves spread so far, we now move to the next question. From small tax to big tremor, what mechanisms made the entire global financial system shudder at a number so easy to overlook? 1%, 2%. In the world of international trade, numbers like these are usually dismissed as trivial. Yet, the very 1.2% tariff the US placed on Swiss gold shows that sometimes the smallest things can cause the biggest tremors. In raw calculation, the figure adds up to about $82 million a year, a grain of sand compared to the hundreds of billions flowing through global trade. But financial markets don't run on volume or sheer size. They run on speed, seamlessness, and trust. Slow one link in the chain, disrupt one steady rhythm, and the whole system reverberates. Imagine a shipment of gold from Switzerland to New York. Previously, it only took a few days to clear procedures and enter storage. Now, with the tariff, it faces an extra layer of origin checks, transparency certification, and additional paperwork. Costs rise, but more critically, the flow slows. A Wall Street bank recalculating a repo contract, where gold serves as collateral, must raise interest rates because it's no longer certain the bars will arrive on time. Spreads widen, borrowing costs inch upward, and the ripple effect spreads like concentric waves from a stone hitting water. Almost immediately, US bonds feel the impact. International investors, noticing rising financial costs, adjust their portfolios for greater safety. This pushes up demand for treasury bonds, occasionally causing yields to swing unpredictably. The US dollar, already seen as a safe haven, grows even stronger as global money seeks shelter. Ironically, American exporters feel the squeeze. A stronger dollar makes US goods more expensive, further thinning profit margins that were already tight. This is the subtlety of the shock. A tariff that looks small ends up creating unpredictable ripple effects. Individual investors see jewelry prices climb, hedge funds struggle with repo costs, central banks worry about the timeliness of reserves. All because of something that seemed too minor to matter, 1.2% on Swiss gold. The gold market thrives on continuity. Delays, barriers, and uncertainty are unwelcome. Gold, in its role as a safe haven asset, demands swiftness, because in a crisis, every hour, every minute can be life or death. If a bank can't be sure Swiss gold will arrive on time for collateral, it must pay more to find alternatives. And that is the tax on time, an invisible levy the entire system ends up shouldering. The danger is that once trust is shaken, other markets begin reacting in chain. Not just gold, but pharmaceuticals, chemical catalysts, or watch components, all tied to Switzerland, can fall into the spotlight. Washington's message is clear. If a small tariff can make the world adjust, then this tool will be used again in more sectors, more often. For Bern, this is nothing less than a warning. Switzerland is no longer outside-eyed America's political chessboard. The shock, then, is not only economic, but also political. Behind every flickering market price lie quiet negotiations in US congressional hallways and urgent meetings in Bern to strategize a response. Gold has stopped being just gold. It has become a bargaining chip, a strategic lever between two nations that long considered themselves friendly partners. And at that point, the game no longer belongs solely to the markets. It enters the political arena of US-Swiss relations, where every small decision is weighed against national interests and global standing. In Washington, the decision to impose tariffs on Swiss gold quickly became a heated topic of debate. For some senators from mining and metallurgy states, it was the right move, even hailed as a boost for domestically mined gold to gain a competitive edge. They saw in it the chance to create jobs and revive the image of an America self-reliant in resources. But on the other side, states with jewelry and gold-consuming industries pushed back hard. One major retail chain warned that even a slight increase in gold costs would raise the price of necklaces, wedding rings, and luxury watches, with the ultimate burden falling on American consumers. The divide left Senate committees as the arenas where the fate of the tariff would be decided. Should certain categories be exempted, or should the rules be tightened to send a strong external message? For the Trump administration, this was not just economics, it was politics. Campaign slogans like America First required concrete proof. A tariff on Swiss gold, even at just 1.2%, became an easy-to-tell media story. The government was defending American interests, refusing to let outsiders dictate the nation's economic heartbeat. That message echoed at rallies, was amplified on television, and quickly spread among voters. In U.S. politics, a small tariff can become a powerful card if it taps into the spirit of self-reliance. In Bern, the reaction was no less dramatic. Switzerland, known for its caution, suddenly found its politics consumed by tense debate. One camp argued this should be treated as an opportunity to negotiate. If Washington wanted gold transparency, Bern could demand concessions on pharmaceuticals, or at least better terms for watch and microchip exports. The other camp, however, saw it as U.S. overreach into financial sovereignty. For them, gold was not just an economic sector, but a symbol of the neutrality and financial privacy Switzerland had built for decades. At the negotiating table, both sides knew gold was only the surface. The real issue was the package deal, where gold sat alongside medicine, watch components, and chemical catalysts. Every concession in one area could be exchanged for an advantage in another. This was exactly the kind of complex bargaining Washington excelled at, and Bern had no choice but to join or risk losing ground. Gold thus became a mirror reflecting a far larger trade relationship where every detail carried political weight. Tensions extended beyond economics. In Switzerland, left-wing politicians called for redirecting any extra tariff revenue into climate funds and tech innovation, framing it as a chance to turn pressure into opportunity. Meanwhile, conservatives worried that bending too far to U.S. demands would erode Switzerland's principle of neutrality, the foundation of its financial trust. Some voices even warned, if Switzerland accepts U.S. demands for gold transparency, it won't be long before Washington presses for transparency in banking, insurance, and other sectors the Swiss consider untouchable. These tensions turned gold into the centerpiece of a strategic standoff. America using tariffs as leverage, Switzerland striving to defend its position without damaging the relationship. Both sides understood that a wrong step could spark global consequences. After all, gold isn't just a bilateral trade good, it is a reserve asset and a risk hedge for dozens of nations. That is why every move in this arena was closely watched by capitals from Beijing to New Delhi, from Riyadh to Tokyo. And this is where the story grows larger than just US-Swiss relations. Because when a small policy can shake the entire global financial system, broader geopolitical consequences become unavoidable. The question is no longer simply who wins or loses at the bargaining table, but how the world will adapt when even a tiny tariff can redraw the map of economic power. From Washington to Bern, the storm between the US and Switzerland quickly spilled beyond a simple bilateral trade dispute. The world was watching because gold is not just a commodity, it is the foundation of international financial trust. When a country like the US can rattle the entire gold market with a tiny tariff, the message is clear. No supply chain, no matter how solid it seems, is immune from becoming a hostage of politics. And that message unleashed a cascade of geopolitical consequences far beyond the two nations involved. Canada, Australia, and Japan, all with gold mining and refining industries, were immediately mentioned as potential alternatives to fill the gap. Yet in reality, none could replace Switzerland. Swiss refineries don't just provide capacity, they embody a standard of trust built over decades. A gold bar from a Canadian mine, if it hasn't passed through Zurich or Ticino, is unlikely to be instantly accepted into an Asian central bank's reserves, which means that even if the world wants to reduce its dependence on Switzerland, the transition cannot happen overnight. Meanwhile, emerging economies like India, China, and the Gulf states saw the issue from another angle. For them, America's move was a warning bell. If Washington is willing to use a minor tariff to test the strength of the gold supply chain, then tomorrow it could just as easily do the same with oil, pharmaceuticals, or semiconductors. Political risk in trade is no longer an abstract idea. It has become reality. And that reality forces countries to reconsider. Should they rely too heavily on systems that the US can touch at any moment? For China, the world's largest gold importer, the development triggered even more strategic thinking. Beijing has long sought to build Shanghai into a global gold hub, gradually breaking away from the London-Zurich standard. Moves like the US tariff on Swiss gold, paradoxically, give China more reason to accelerate its push for gold self-sufficiency. Yet the world knows this. To reach Switzerland's level of credibility, China still has a long road ahead. Trust, when tied to global reserve assets, cannot be built with technology or capacity alone. It requires history and transparency. In the Middle East, resource-rich nations quietly paid attention. Riyadh and Abu Dhabi recognized that if gold could be targeted, then oil, their economic lifeblood, could one day be politicized in the same way. The lesson was not only to diversify economies, but also to diversify supply chains, reducing vulnerability to the moment when a superpower decides to flex its strength through seemingly minor tools. Even in academia and international finance, the concept of a tax on time began to circulate. This isn't a tax on goods in the traditional sense, but a levy on delay, on political risk, and on shaken trust. A small tariff can extend transport by days, push up financial costs, and create an invisible burden the entire system must bear. Once this concept is acknowledged, it points to a new reality. Global trade is governed not only by tariffs and treaties, but also by the political friction great powers can generate at will. All these consequences show that the US-Swiss gold tariff is not an isolated issue. It is a mirror of how politics can penetrate areas once thought to be purely technical. And once that door is open, the world must adapt to a new reality. Every transaction, whether in gold, oil, or semiconductors, can become a weapon in the hands of superpowers. This doesn't just redraw the map of trade, it reshapes the very way nations build their strategies for economic security. And from here, the story becomes much bigger. Because as these geopolitical ripples spread, it is not only the gold market that must adjust, the entire global political and economic system must adapt. That is when a small tariff is no longer seen as a financial tool, but as the beginning of a new order, where national power is measured by the ability to turn even the most invisible gears. One click, one line on an official document from Washington, and the gold world was thrown into turmoil. A mere 1.2% tariff, so small that many thought it hardly worth debating, unleashed a global wave, stretching from New York trading floors to the secret vaults buried deep beneath Zurich, from wedding rings in small Los Angeles shops to the vast reserves of Asian central banks. The world operates as a hyper-connected network where even the tiniest knot can shake the entire system. The US-Swiss gold tariff reminds us that in today's era, politics doesn't only unfold in congressional chambers, summit halls, or on international television. It seeps into procedural guidelines, origin certificates, and even shipping schedules. Politics hides within details that seem invisible, and it is precisely those details that can shape the flow of global finance. A small tariff doesn't just change the price of gold, it changes how the world understands power, showing that strength lies not only in grand decisions, but in the ability to adjust the smallest hinges. We live in an age where every delay carries a cost, every risk comes with a price, and every political action leaves its mark on the markets. Gold is only the latest example. Tomorrow, it could be pharmaceuticals, oil, semiconductors, or any other resource the world depends on. This reality forces us to ask, can a policy that seems trivial truly shape the fate of international finance? And if so, who really holds the switch to the world's system? Perhaps that is the deepest message of this story. Small hinges can open great doors, and international politics often turns on those very hinges, hidden though they may seem. When Washington tapped lightly on Switzerland's gold, the whole world leaned in to hear the echo. Because behind every decision, even one as slight as 1.2%, lies a move in the game that reshapes the global order. Ladies and gentlemen, what do you think of this story? Can a tiny tariff truly spark a global earthquake? Or is this merely the prelude to a new economic order taking shape? Share your thoughts in the comments below. And don't forget to subscribe so you won't miss our next deep dive analysis of a world changing every single day. Every comment, every share is what drives us to keep bringing you timely and insightful perspectives on the shifting tides of our times.